Ladies and gentlemen, every room speaks, not with words but with energy, posture, and subtle signs. The ability to enter any space and instantly read its social temperature is not a rare talent, but a teachable skill rooted in behavioral science. It begins by paying close attention to the nonverbal cues that often go unnoticed. Where are people looking? Are their shoulders tight or relaxed? Are voices low and hesitant or loud and confident? These clues form an emotional blueprint of the environment. With practice, you begin to see not just people, but the patterns of communication and energy they create. Central to this ability is a system inside the human brain called mirror neurons. These neurons fire not just when we act, but when we observe someone else acting. It's why emotions are contagious and why we unconsciously mirror the body language of those around us. The beauty of this system is that once you become aware of it, you can override unconscious mimicry and instead use deliberate mirroring to build connection or establish comfort, especially in high-stakes environments. Discipline, similarly, is often misunderstood as a matter of brute willpower. But true discipline is a system, not a struggle. It is influenced heavily by environment. When your surroundings are cluttered or chaotic, your mind mimics that disorder. But when you design your environment with intention, choosing quiet over noise, light over dimness, order over chaos, your discipline strengthens naturally. The more optimized the space, the less internal resistance you feel. But what happens when you can't change your environment? That's where mental priming comes in. Imagine associating a specific song, scent, or posture with focused effort. When repeated often enough, those cues become a trigger. Your brain shifts into performance mode automatically. This is the basis of behavioral conditioning. Like an athlete stepping into the arena, your internal system learns when it's time to focus simply because you've taught it through repetition. Reading a room also means decoding the social architecture that isn't announced out loud. Who speaks and who listens? Who seems uncomfortable and who commands attention? In any group, there's an invisible structure, often more important than what's being said. When you can identify those patterns, you adjust your behavior to either blend in, lead, or exit at the right time. This ability gives you a tactical advantage in everything from negotiation to leadership to simple everyday conversations. Finally, discipline doesn't have to feel heavy. It is best built through micro commitments, tiny promises you keep to yourself. Waking up 10 minutes earlier, writing 1 paragraph a day, choosing water over soda. These may seem small, but they have a cumulative effect on your self-perception. Each one proves to your mind that you are someone who follows through, and as you keep these small commitments, the larger ones become easier to manage. You begin to trust yourself. That is the true reward of discipline, not just achieving goals, but becoming the kind of person who can. In every room you enter, and in every habit you build, your brain is waiting for instructions. Read the signals, set the tone, and act with intention. The power to shape your reality, socially, mentally, and behaviorally, is not distant. It is already inside you, waiting to be trained. Understanding the emotional climate of any room is one of the most powerful tools in human interaction, communication, leadership, and decision-making. It is not about being a mind reader, but about becoming observant, receptive, and tuned into the subtle, often unspoken dynamics happening around you. The ability to read a room allows you to enter with more awareness, engage with more empathy, and respond with greater intelligence, whether you're walking into a meeting, a classroom, a gathering, or even a one-on-one conversation. The environment is filled with emotional cues that reveal what people are feeling, expecting, fearing, or trying to avoid. These cues are not always verbal. In fact, more than 90% of emotional communication happens non-verbally. Facial expressions, posture, body orientation, gestures, eye contact, fidgeting, silence, tone, and energy levels all act like emotional signals. When you train your mind to recognize and interpret them, you gain access to the underlying truth of what's happening in any space. The first step is to pause and observe before you act. Most people enter a room with their thoughts focused on what they want to say or do. But those who truly understand social dynamics take a few seconds to scan the room. This doesn't mean staring or appearing hesitant. It means subtly absorbing the energy, noticing where people are grouped, how they are standing or sitting, what expressions they carry, and whether the atmosphere feels tense, neutral, relaxed, or charged. For example, a room where most people have their arms crossed, little eye contact, and are positioned far apart usually signals emotional distance, discomfort, or a lack of trust. On the other hand, a room with open body language, slight leaning toward each other, light laughter, and relaxed shoulders reflects emotional openness and trust. Reading a room is not about judgment but understanding. It's important to approach the skill with curiosity, not assumption. Just because someone is quiet doesn't mean they're upset. Just because someone is smiling doesn't mean they're comfortable. The goal is to detect patterns and shifts, not to label people. What matters is how the group dynamic is functioning. Are people aligned or divided? Is the energy building or dropping? Are there dominant voices and silent observers? These are the threads that weave the emotional fabric of a room. Once you start noticing them, your confidence and clarity improve dramatically. Context also plays a huge role. You must consider where you are, why people are gathered, and what expectations might exist. The same posture that seems disengaged in a brainstorming session might be completely normal in a formal lecture. A great reader of the room knows how to adjust their interpretation based on the environment. They don't react to a single sign, but to the overall pattern. This kind of observational discipline helps you avoid misreading situations and instead approach them with intelligent adaptability. Once you've read the emotional climate, the next step is aligning your presence with what the room needs. This is not about faking anything. It's about being intentional. If the room is anxious and your goal is to bring calm, then speak slowly, breathe deeply, and model a composed demeanor. If the room is flat and needs energy, then be a little more expressive, use positive words, raise your tone slightly. The key is to become a regulator of emotional tone, not a reactor. When you understand the climate, you can either match it or shift it. Both are powerful, depending on your purpose. Developing this skill takes practice. It requires you to stop focusing only on yourself and start tuning into others. It means being less concerned with performance and more engaged in perception. But as you grow this ability, you'll find that you are better at handling difficult conversations, navigating social tension, inspiring collaboration, and even avoiding conflict. You will feel more in control, not because you dominate the space, but because you understand it. Emotional intelligence isn't about saying the perfect thing. It's about knowing what's needed and delivering it with awareness and authenticity. In the end, every room has a story. People carry in emotions, experiences, and expectations, often without saying a word. The wise person learns to listen not just with ears, but with eyes, intuition, and presence. By mastering the art of reading the emotional climate, you step into any room not as a stranger, but as a leader of awareness. This isn't a trick or tactic, it's a discipline of attention, and when practiced consistently, it becomes one of the most impactful tools for personal growth and professional success. The human brain is built for connection. One of the most fascinating systems within our nervous architecture is the mirror neuron system, which plays a crucial role in how we understand, reflect, and engage with the behavior of others. This mechanism explains why we feel emotions just by observing others. When someone smiles at you, you instinctively smile back. When you see someone in pain, you may flinch or feel discomfort yourself. These are not just social reactions, they are neurologically programmed responses. Mirror neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you see someone else perform the same action. This means your brain is constantly simulating the experiences of people around you, often without your conscious awareness. It's through this built-in design that we develop empathy, learn by imitation, and form bonds with others. This also means that the energy of others can impact you, and equally, your energy can influence a room. When you walk into any environment, your mirror neurons start sensing with the emotional signals you pick up. If the mood is tense, your body may unconsciously tighten. If the room is filled with laughter, you may begin to feel lighter or more relaxed. Behavioral synchrony is what happens when people unconsciously begin to mirror each other's movements, tone, or posture. It's why groups walking or sitting together tend to fall into rhythm, or why friends often adopt similar speech patterns. This synchrony creates trust and group cohesion. In social situations, these moments of mirroring are key to rapport building. When two individuals are in sync, they tend to trust each other more, understand each other better, and communicate more smoothly, even without speaking. Being aware of this natural mirroring effect opens up a path to more intentional interactions. Instead of being passively influenced by the energy around you, you can start to guide it. For example, if you enter a space where the energy is low or hesitant, you can deliberately project warmth and openness. Use your body language to communicate that you are calm, attentive, and welcoming. Speak slowly and clearly. Maintain gentle eye contact. Gradually, the people around you will start to reflect those same cues because of the mirror neuron effect. This does not mean manipulating others, but rather using the brain's natural design to build better connection, create a more supportive emotional tone, and lead more effectively. At the same time, awareness of behavioral synchrony can protect you. Environments filled with stress, aggression, or negative energy can pull you into emotional states that aren't your own. If you're not paying attention, you might start to absorb tension that doesn't belong to you simply because your mirror neurons are syncing with the mood around you. This is where emotional discipline comes in. By recognizing what your brain is doing, you can pause and ask yourself, is this emotion mine? Or am I mirroring someone else? This simple internal check allows you to separate your own state from the emotional climate and stay grounded. You become more conscious, less reactive, and far more resilient under pressure. This concept is also powerful in leadership and teaching. A leader who models calm in a crisis helps the group stay focused. A teacher who speaks with energy and clarity can engage students even when they start off distracted. In these cases, the leader becomes a behavioral anchor. Others unconsciously align with that tone because their brains are designed to follow social cues that signal stability or inspiration. This principle applies to parenting, coaching, sales, public speaking, virtually every human context where influence is involved. It's not about charisma or dominance. It's about alignment, intention, and consistency in your behavior. The mirror neuron system also helps explain why presence matters more than words. People may forget what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. That feeling comes largely from the signals you send through your expressions, tone, gestures, and posture, all of which are picked up and reflected by others' nervous systems. If you want to be a person who calms, inspires, motivates, or reassures, it starts with regulating your own state. Your emotional tone sets a rhythm that others begin to follow. It's a ripple effect, one that can change conversations, shift dynamics, and strengthen trust. Mastering behavioral synchrony begins with observation, but it thrives on intention. Notice how people around you carry themselves. Watch how groups align over time. Observe how quickly someone mirrors your posture when you're connecting with them. And then try consciously shifting your tone, movement, or expression, and notice how it influences the space. With time and awareness, you'll gain a deep sense of how your presence shapes outcomes. You are not just reacting to your environment, you are constantly shaping it. When you understand this, you gain access to an invisible form of influence, grounded not in control, but in conscious engagement. The environment you place yourself in plays a direct and powerful role in shaping your behavior, mindset, and capacity for self-discipline. Far from being just a background setting, your surroundings act as a silent force that influences how you think, feel, and act. This isn't just about physical space, but the total atmosphere you operate in, visual clutter, noise levels, lighting, the presence of others, the colors around you, the layout of a room, and even the energy or mood within that space. All of these factors either support or sabotage your efforts to remain focused, disciplined, and mentally sharp. Understanding the psychological impact of your environment gives you a strategic advantage. Instead of relying solely on willpower, you begin to engineer discipline by design. When the environment is chaotic, the mind tends to mirror that chaos. Cluttered spaces often lead to mental overwhelm. If your desk is piled with unrelated tasks, if your phone constantly buzzes with distractions, or if your space lacks a clear structure, your brain struggles to prioritize. Cognitive science shows that every new visual or auditory stimulus competes for your attention, draining your limited mental resources. This is why working in a noisy or disorganized setting often leads to procrastination, fatigue, or fractured focus. In contrast, when you walk into a clean, quiet, organized space, your mind naturally shifts into a state of clarity and readiness. There is less to distract you, and therefore more mental energy available for the task at hand. This is the foundation of environmental discipline. It allows your brain to focus without the constant effort of resisting temptations or filtering out noise. Lighting is another underestimated but essential factor. Natural light supports alertness, mood, and cognitive performance, while dim or artificial lighting can lead to sluggishness and lack of motivation. A well-lit environment, especially one that mimics daylight, sends signals to your brain that it's time to be active and alert. Similarly, the ergonomics of your space influence your energy. An uncomfortable chair, poor posture, or awkward workspace setup can subtly drain your energy and motivation throughout the day. The more physically strained you are, the less mental discipline you can maintain. That's because discomfort consumes willpower. Your brain diverts attention toward managing physical stress instead of applying it to deep thinking or sustained focus. The people in your environment also contribute heavily to your internal state. When surrounded by individuals who are lazy, distracted, or negative, your own discipline tends to weaken through social contagion. You begin to unconsciously lower your standards. On the other hand, when you are in a space where others are focused, intentional, and committed to personal growth, their energy becomes fuel for your own discipline. You begin to sync with that rhythm, and discipline starts to feel less like an internal battle and more like a shared momentum. This is why choosing the right study groups, co-working spaces, or peer networks is so important. The environment you choose is a reflection of the standards you're willing to accept. Even the digital environment you interact with matters. Your phone, computer apps, and online spaces can either encourage discipline or constantly interrupt it. If your digital space is cluttered with alerts, notifications, random tabs, and distractions, your attention becomes fragmented. By curating your digital environment, using focus tools, silencing unnecessary alerts, and organizing your digital workspace, you reduce the friction between you and your goals. The less effort it takes to begin working, the more likely you are to follow through consistently. In this way, environmental discipline isn't about restriction. It's about reduction of friction, confusion, and distraction so that your energy flows in a direct and purposeful direction. When you intentionally shape your surroundings to support discipline, something powerful happens. Your behavior changes without force. You begin to follow through more naturally. Your rituals become more consistent. Your habits become more automatic. This is because the environment starts doing the heavy lifting. You no longer need to summon motivation each time. The space around you acts as a silent cue, nudging you toward focused action. Over time, this creates a feedback loop. Structured environments lead to better discipline, which leads to stronger habits, which then make it easier to maintain that structure. Ultimately, the environment is not neutral. It is either working for you or against you. It can either distract, exhaust, and weaken your discipline, or it can elevate, focus, and strengthen it. Once you realize this, you stop relying on willpower alone and begin building systems that support your goals. You gain clarity not by forcing your brain to focus harder, but by designing the space around you to make focus easy. Discipline becomes less of a daily struggle and more of a natural response to a well-crafted environment. And that is how lasting transformation begins, not with massive effort, but with intentional design. Discipline is often viewed as a trait that some people naturally have while others struggle with, but in reality, it is much more about systems and structure than about raw willpower. One of the most effective and sustainable ways to build discipline is through the use of behavioral triggers and mental priming. These are psychological cues, small signals or conditions that prepare the brain for a certain response or activity. Just like a light switch turns on the electricity in a room, behavioral triggers turn on specific mental states. They are deliberate actions or environmental elements that, when used consistently, can help you move into a state of focus, productivity, or motivation almost automatically. Mental priming is a concept rooted in cognitive psychology. It refers to the way exposure to certain stimuli can influence your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors without you even realizing it. For example, hearing a particular song may instantly put you in a reflective or energized mood because your brain associates that music with a specific emotion or memory. This same principle can be harnessed intentionally. By choosing specific repeated cues, you train your mind to prepare for the task ahead. For instance, lighting a specific candle scent before sitting down to study, putting on a designated pair of headphones before writing, or starting your day by opening a particular book can prime your brain for the behavior you want to cultivate. The key to making behavioral triggers work is consistency. The more often you pair a specific cue with a specific activity, the stronger the association becomes in your brain. Over time, this pairing becomes automatic. You no longer need to convince yourself to focus or get into the zone. Your brain recognizes the cue and immediately prepares for the behavior associated with it. This system dramatically reduces the cognitive effort required to be disciplined. Instead of constantly battling against distractions or low motivation, you operate from a place of routine and predictability, which frees up mental energy for deeper work. Another powerful aspect of mental priming is the role of identity reinforcement. When you design triggers that align with your desired identity, you strengthen your self-perception. For example, if your trigger is to sit at a clean desk each morning with a fresh notebook and a cup of tea, you begin to see yourself as someone who is organized, calm, and productive. Your brain adopts that identity and supports the behavior that matches it. This creates a feedback loop. Your triggers shape your behavior shapes your identity, and your identity reinforces the desire to keep using the triggers. This approach also helps overcome the common resistance that people feel when starting a task. Often, the hardest part of being disciplined is simply beginning. When you rely on motivation or mood to start, your behavior becomes inconsistent. But when you have a trigger, a fixed routine or cue, the transition from rest to action becomes smoother. You no longer have to think, debate, or procrastinate. The brain responds to the familiar signal and shifts into the required mental gear. This is especially helpful in high-stakes or high-resistance tasks, such as creative work, exercise, or deep study. Even when your mind feels sluggish or distracted, the presence of a consistent trigger can help bridge the gap between intention and action. Priming also works well with language. The words you speak to yourself or hear regularly can act as triggers. Affirmations, mantras, or even simple phrases like "let's go" or "it's time to focus" can act as verbal switches that engage your brain's attention circuits. The more emotionally charged or personally meaningful the phrase, the more effective the mental shift. This is why many athletes or performers have rituals and pre-performance routines that include specific words or gestures. They're not just habits. They're mental preparation tools. Incorporating these elements into your daily life requires some planning, but it doesn't need to be complicated. Choose 1 or 2 activities where you want more discipline, perhaps morning study or evening workouts. Then create a simple, repeatable cue. It might be a specific location, sound, scent, movement, or object. Use it every single time before that activity. Over a few weeks, your brain will begin to associate the cue with the desired behavior, and the resistance will decrease. You'll notice that your ability to focus improves. Your actions become more automatic, and your follow-through strengthens. Ultimately, discipline is not about constantly fighting your impulses. It is about creating systems that make the desired action the path of least resistance. Behavioral triggers and mental priming don't force discipline, they invite it. They prepare your mind, signal your intent, and allow you to flow into focused action with greater ease and less stress. By mastering these small, strategic habits, you transform discipline from a struggle into a natural state of being. Every group, team, or social setting operates within an invisible structure of influence, power, connection, and roles, even if nobody says a word about it. This structure is what we call a social hierarchy or group dynamic. Understanding how these dynamics operate gives you an extraordinary advantage in both personal and professional situations. When you walk into a room, you're not just walking into a space filled with people, you're stepping into a living system of relationships. Some individuals may be confident and vocal, while others are withdrawn or passive. Some command attention when they speak, while others are barely noticed. These patterns are not random. They are rooted in social behavior, body language, communication habits, and the unspoken agreements that form within every group. The ability to recognize and decode these hidden layers is one of the most valuable forms of social intelligence. Most people go through life unaware of these dynamics. They speak when it's not their turn, push forward without understanding the group's rhythm, or retreat in situations where presence is needed. But when you can read the unspoken rules of interaction, who holds influence, who's trusted, who's being ignored, you begin to act with far more accuracy and effectiveness. You don't waste time talking over dominant voices, and you don't overlook the quiet individual who may hold more insight than the loudest person in the room. You observe the flow, identify the undercurrents, and then position yourself wisely within them. Decoding these hierarchies begins with observation. Who initiates conversation, who people naturally look at when a decision needs to be made, who interrupts and gets away with it, and who gets ignored when they try, who leans in, who pulls back, and who sits at the center of the group versus the edge. These behaviors reveal the balance of social power and influence without a single word needing to be spoken. It's not always the manager or the most senior person who holds the real influence. Sometimes, it's the emotionally intelligent team member who mediates conflict or the quiet thinker who consistently delivers the best ideas. Influence doesn't always match position, and being able to spot that distinction makes you smarter and more adaptable. Power in a room isn't only about dominance, it's also about emotional gravity. Some people draw others in through empathy, humor, or clarity. Others dominate through control, volume, or confidence. When you understand these styles, you begin to see which type of influence is in play. This knowledge helps you decide how to contribute, whether to match the tone, elevate it, soften it, or simply observe for the right moment. This doesn't mean manipulating people. It means navigating relationships with awareness. It allows you to build alliances, avoid unnecessary conflict, and deliver your message with precision. Understanding roles also helps you avoid common mistakes. For instance, entering a new environment and trying to take control too early without reading the room can lead to resistance or isolation. Conversely, staying too quiet when your insight is needed may cause you to be overlooked. But when you can sense when to lead and when to follow, when to speak and when to listen, you begin to move through social environments with grace. You start recognizing how your presence shifts the dynamic and how to use that awareness to bring value without causing disruption. This kind of intelligence is especially important in leadership and team settings. Great leaders don't just manage tasks, they manage energy, emotion, and influence. They recognize the unspoken patterns of communication and use that knowledge to strengthen the team. They know when someone needs to be brought forward, when someone needs support, and when it's time to redirect attention. This sensitivity creates trust, and trust fuels productivity, loyalty, and collaboration. In professional life, the ability to sense and adapt to unspoken hierarchies can accelerate your growth faster than technical skill alone. Even in one-on-one settings, the same principles apply. People express their position through subtle cues. Eye contact, word choice, voice tone, personal space, and timing. If you're attuned to these cues, you respond with insight. If not, you may miss opportunities to build rapport or create influence. The way someone looks away after making a point or how they pause before answering, these are signals of comfort, uncertainty, or authority. When you become fluent in this subtle language, you become more persuasive, more empathetic, and more respected. Ultimately, reading social hierarchies is not about climbing to the top. It's about understanding the structure so you can move effectively within it. It's about recognizing the flow of trust, respect, and influence in a way that allows you to contribute meaningfully without unnecessary friction. This awareness gives you an edge, not because you dominate, but because you understand. And understanding always leads to better outcomes, deeper connections, and smarter decisions. Discipline is not something that magically appears in moments of motivation. It is built slowly, intentionally, and repeatedly through a series of small, consistent actions known as micro-commitments. These are the foundational blocks of long-term success, and while they may appear insignificant on the surface, their cumulative power is profound. Micro commitments are tiny promises you make to yourself, daily actions that are so manageable and achievable that they don't trigger resistance or fear. The purpose of these small actions is not to achieve massive change all at once, but to create momentum, reinforce self-trust, and build the mental pathways necessary for sustained discipline. Many people fail to develop discipline because they set unrealistic goals from the start. They aim for drastic transformation, thinking they need to work for hours every day or completely change their lifestyle overnight. While ambition is admirable, sudden and overwhelming changes are difficult for the brain to sustain. That's where micro commitments come in. Instead of trying to overhaul your life in one day, you commit to 5 minutes of focus work, 1 page of writing, 1 glass of water instead of soda, or 1 honest conversation per day. These actions are too small to fail, but meaningful enough to signal progress. The brain responds positively to success, no matter how small. Every time you complete a micro commitment, you send a message to your subconscious, I keep my promises. This strengthens your internal identity as someone who is consistent, reliable, and disciplined. The next time you face a task, your mind recalls those moments of follow-through, and discipline becomes easier. You're not starting from scratch, you're building on a track record of consistency. That is how discipline becomes a habit, not through pressure, but through patterns. Micro commitments also reduce the emotional weight of starting. Often, the hardest part of any task is the beginning. You may dread a 60-minute workout or a long study session, but committing to just 5 minutes feels doable. Once you start, momentum often carries you further than you planned. This is known as the gateway effect. The initial action is the gateway to deeper focus and extended effort. Even if you only stick to the micro commitment, you've still succeeded, and that repeated success changes your perception of discipline from something painful to something empowering. These small commitments also fit seamlessly into your day. Discipline fails when it demands too much too quickly, especially when life is busy or unpredictable. But micro commitments adapt to your schedule. You can anchor them to habits you already have. For example, after brushing your teeth, you could take 1 minute to plan your top 3 priorities for the day. After lunch, you could walk for 5 minutes or review 1 paragraph of a project. These habits don't require massive time investments, but over weeks and months, they compound into impressive outcomes. Another powerful benefit of micro commitments is that they give you emotional stability. When life becomes overwhelming and your motivation is low, it's easy to feel like everything is falling apart. But if you've developed the discipline to stick to even 1 or 2 micro commitments each day, you maintain a thread of control. You can say, even if nothing else goes right, I kept this promise to myself. That sense of control becomes an anchor, keeping you grounded when chaos hits. It reminds you that discipline is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about showing up consistently in small, meaningful ways. Over time, these micro commitments build trust, not just in yourself, but from others. People begin to see you as dependable. They notice that you follow through not in dramatic ways, but in quiet, consistent action. This consistency builds credibility in teams, relationships, and leadership. Trust is rarely built through big speeches or bold plans. It's built through repeated, reliable actions. And micro commitments are how that reliability is formed and maintained. To start using micro commitments effectively, choose an area where you want more discipline and break it down into the smallest possible action. If you want to read more, start with 1 paragraph per day. If you want to meditate, start with 1 minute. If you want to write a book, start with 1 sentence. Then repeat it daily. The goal is not perfection, it's consistency. As the habit grows, you can naturally increase the effort without force. But the power is in the start, and the secret is in the scale. Discipline is not about how hard you can push when you're motivated. It's about what you consistently do when no one is watching, when motivation is absent, and when progress feels slow. Micro commitments give you the structure and strategy to act in those moments. They turn discipline into a daily rhythm instead of an occasional push. And in the end, that rhythm becomes the foundation for every meaningful achievement in your life.